hallelujah, finding grace, Esther prepared herself 1 year, set herself apart from her family, set herself aside, did not even, because she had already heard, and you can find this in Esther, the chapter 2, you'll find out where Mordecai had went and said that, oh, Haman was out to destroy the children of God, the children that Esther, the family in which Esther came from, and all of a sudden Esther said, I'll prepare myself for the king. I wish somebody in here would get ready to prepare yourself for the king. Before we leave here tonight, we're going to be prepared for the king. We're going to understand what grace truly is. When we talk about how Esther prepared herself, she spent 6 months with frankincense and myrrh and all kinds of different herbs that she allowed her body to be able to soak in, that she could have a perfume that would get the attention of the king. And all of a sudden, when she was welcomed into the king found favor with her. But the Bible talks about that it just wasn't any ordinary favor, but out of Esther 2 and 16 and 17, that you'll find out through all the other versions that it was only Esther that won the grace and the favor in the sight of the king, so that he set a royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vesta. Let me tell you something. When you prepare yourself for the king, see, that's not something God's going to do for you. That's what you got to do for God. Come on, somebody help me. I've heard people say, oh, I wish God would take this away from me. I wish God would take that away from me. Well, God's not the one that got you started on it. You're the one that got you started. You need to be the one to get you unstarted. You hear what I'm telling you? So when it talks about grace, God will give you grace, but it's up to you to prepare yourself for the king. Do you hear what I'm saying? Esther spent a year preparing herself for the king. Some of us, if we don't get a huckabuck or a shikamasha, call up in a Honda and go bye-bye, I'm telling you, we just think we ain't got it. But Esther said, I don't care whether I feel it or not, I'm going to go in. She said, if I die, I die, but I'm going to spend a year preparing myself. The first thing we want to do is when we would come to the altar, we want to get up and have a pulpit ministry. We want to be sure. We want to jump up and everybody looks at us and we get some attention. Esther said, I'm going to spend a year preparing myself before anybody gets my attention. She said, I'm going to spend a year. We got so many novices today behind the pulpit that didn't prepare. They just went. They didn't get called. They just went. Esther said, I'm going to spend a year preparing myself. And when she went into the king, and the king looked upon her and began to smell that sweet smell and savor, he began to say, that's who I want. And when he identified that is who he wanted to be queen, he set a royal crown upon her. And guess what? When he did that, the whole kingdom knew that she had found grace and favor with the king. Somebody ought to give God praise for grace and favor. Jeremiah 31 and verse 2 and 3. Jeremiah 31. Some of you may need a pen and a piece of paper to write this stuff down, because this will find grace for you. This will help you to find grace. Jeremiah 31 verse 2 and 3. Thus saith the Lord, the people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness. My God, do you understand that the children of Israel spent 40 years in the wilderness and their shoes never wore out? Don't tell me that even in the wilderness you can't find some grace and some favor. My God, the quail fed them from out of the air, and manna come up from the earth. They were taken care of, and And even in Moses' frustration, he struck a rock and out come water, and they were sustained in the wilderness for 40 years. I come to tell you, even in the midst of your wilderness, you can still have grace. Oh my God, somebody help me. You can still have grace in the midst of your trouble, in the midst of your torments, in the midst of your frustration, in the midst of your sickness, in the midst of your disease. Honey, there's favor because, and there's grace because he said, with his stripes I am healed. My God, somebody ought to shout right there.